Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. That time of weekend, everybody's favorite segment, the MLB Power Rankings, guys. The season is pretty much full under swing now. We got about 2 months into the season. Things are really starting to take shape, at least for a few teams. We can really start to count some teams out. We've had some more firings this week. We'll get to that in a minute. We have teams battling for the top of the conferences, a little bit of a shakeup in some of the conferences, in my opinion, a little bit more teams struggling to really find their identity as well, kind of in the bottom middling rows here. We're going to jump into it. We're going to go through all 30 teams. Going to try to do it a little bit quickly today because for a lot of these teams, I don't think there is too much to talk about before we do jump in. If you are new here, like and subscribe to the channel. We are growing very fast, and I really do appreciate every like. It helps spread the audience, and the comments is really what keeps me doing this every week, keeping the discussion going in the comments. I really appreciate those guys that comment every week or every few weeks. I like to try to get voices from all teams across the MLB, trying to be as unbiased as possible while doing this. And I think the easiest one on this board is number 30. We got the Colorado Rockies. They did manage to find a win this week against their division rivals, the Arizona Diamondbacks, but overall 1-5 week, getting swept by the Texas Rangers to start the week, 2-1 against Arizona. Almost maybe had a series win today, losing only 1-0 in that game, but alas, they are still on pace to probably be the worst team in MLB history. So that is probably the one ranking on this board that everyone can agree with. Number 29. This is where things start to maybe get difference of opinions, but this one seems pretty close to me. The Pittsburgh Pirates just seem to be that team that can't get anything going. 1-2 against the Mets. They get swept in the Pennsylvania series this weekend, going 0-3 there, and including losing, I think, both games this week with Paul Skeens on the mound. I believe that's the case. And when that's happening, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. Right now, Skeens is like the only highlight on this team. I'm not sure how much years they have left before they're probably going to end up trading them, as they tend to do with these Pittsburgh pitchers. But yeah, I think falling down, this is like a new low for the Pirates, at least in the past few seasons. We kept seeing little glimpses that they might be moving up. Just seems like this is their new spot. Number 28. Believe it or not, win the series against the Dodgers over this weekend, and probably pretty good fashion. The offense really came alive for the Angels this week, but that one series, in my opinion, wasn't enough to really bolster them up the rankings. A couple of other teams ahead of them that they might be in a good fight with, and we'll get to them in a minute. Overall, 500 on the week for the Angels. They do lose the series to the Padres, 1-2. So 500 against the two top teams in the NL West, it's a little bit of something to boost. Put them ahead of the Pirates in my books, but right now I still kind of think the other teams ahead of them probably have their number. Number 27, just complete disaster at this point. We do have the Baltimore Orioles 0-6 this week, including 3 games lost in Minnesota, which I do believe made them 0-6 against Minnesota over the past 2 weeks. Getting swept by the Washington Nationals is like an absolute new low for the Orioles in the past few years. If you have been on this channel for a while, the Orioles were a number 30 staple a couple of years ago. And it seems like they might be trying to make their way back just based on what we saw this week. Firing their longtime manager now, Hyde, he is out of there. But on top of that, the last 2 games, I think against Washington, they gave up 10 runs. Overall, 24 runs against the Washington Nationals. The pitching has just been atrocious. And we could talk about the batting and all that, but we're just not going to. We're going to keep moving on. And the Washington Nationals, they do a little bit of a bounce back this week, and it pretty much on the grave of Hyde and the Baltimore Orioles. Sweeping that series did give them that boost, in my opinion, up there. They still, in the National League, have a long way to go, and we saw it earlier in the week. 3 games they lose out of 4 to the Atlanta Braves, a team that had struggled early. Maybe they just didn't catch them early enough. But it seemed like a team's going in 2 separate directions, especially when they're supposed to be division rivals, etc. I think Washington, we see glimpses, especially of offense on this team. They have some talent intermixed in there that is having some good seasons. But right now, they can't really put it all together for a long period of time. Next up, number 25, kind of leaving them in the same spot as last week. Talked about why I moved them up last week. There was a lot of maybe analytic-wise that put them a little bit ahead of these teams, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. They are very much still a bottom team and still pretty bad. And we saw it over this weekend in the Chicago City series. They just got pretty much obliterated by the Cubs, losing all those games and giving up quite a lot of runs. And they started the week off pretty good. They had a series win against the Cincinnati Reds, a team that is supposed to be that up-and-coming team. We have seen glimpses on the Reds on that, and we'll get to them in a second. But the White Sox have not been complete disaster. The record might look a little rough, but we got to remember what is turning out to possibly be the best division in baseball right now in the American League Central. They do have a lot of games in there, and with the Hot Twins, who were at one point trying to fight for that last spot, different story now. Number 24. After I've moved them up a little bit, I think they're starting to come back to fruition. And when they have a run differential that they kind of do, and they give up the runs that they seem to have starting to catch up to them, especially record-wise. They were flirting around 500 for a while. I think it started to come off a little bit for them this week. Getting swept by the Giants this weekend. Losing by 1 run today. It was a tight game, maybe both. Yesterday was a 1-run game too. But either way, they got swept by the Giants and only took 1 game off the Dodgers before the Dodgers just piled runs on them the last 2 games of that series. So overall, 1-5 week for the Athletics. If anything, if the White Sox are going to make a case to come out of it, we might see some good baseball between those 2 teams. Number 23, I still think we're kind of sticking in the same category for a lot of these teams right now. So far, this might be the earliest in the season where we're the farthest along in the power rankings, where I don't really think these teams have any shot at playoffs based on what we've seen. Marlins are no different. So Miami, 1-2 against the Cubs, 2-1 against Tampa. So they win the Florida series this weekend. A pretty good series, honestly, and got to be pretty excited. They're a team that in the past we've kind of wondered how they were going to generate runs, but it seems like even in this Tampa series, they're managing to score a lot more runs than we might have been used to from a Miami team. Overall, 500 week. I think that puts them in the cream of the crop, at least in the bottom row. Next up, number 22. They're trying to differentiate themselves from the rest of the teams on this board, but so far it's been difficult. Some stats going around our Discord was just them being shut out. I forget the number that Tommy was saying, but just a massive amount so far in May. Was it like 8? Was it more than that? Seems like the case. I didn't write that part down, but Milwaukee avoided the sweep today against Minnesota, so they had at least that going for them, going 1-2 as well against Cleveland earlier in the week. So overall 2-4 a week. Not exactly a team that we're used to coming out of Wisconsin there. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Milwaukee's just having that kind of year. It seems like a step back. The offense just isn't putting things together. They don't have the pitching staff that we have seen them have in the past. And the rest of the division seems to be stepping up, maybe, barring the Pirates, but Milwaukee has their work cut out for them. At this point, I think we're talking about teams that can turn it around. Potentially, there is a path for number 21. We have the Boston Red Sox, I think, maybe the closest team to 500 that we're going to talk about so far. But Boston just can't figure it out. It's a really bad week, 1-5 week for them. They were playing 2 teams that were in the playoffs last year, and those are the kind of games you're going to want to win if you're going to make a run at it. Boston, overall, the pitching just has not delivered the way you had thought. Bregman seems to be the signing that they had anticipated, but the rest of the players around him just have not delivered up to the expectations, probably, to be able to bail out the pitching. 0-3 against Detroit, 1-2 against Atlanta, and I believe they squeezed out the win against Atlanta just by the skin of their teeth. The AL East right now is tough, and with Baltimore struggling, you would think that Boston would be able to pick up some games. They haven't really matched up, I think, yet much against Baltimore. I think they only had the 1 series that they already played. But a lot more going on, and they had a lot of games against number 20, the Blue Jays, and did not do so well. On the other side of it, Blue Jays are another team that if you start looking at their stats, pitching, they're the bottom 5 in the MLB with starter ERA. The bullpen, we've seen them blow multiple 9th inning games, late games. A team, in my opinion, probably should have a few more wins under their belt than they do. And they play probably what feels like the most close 1-run games I've seen at least out of them in a long time. So overall, they go 1-2 against Tampa, and coming into this week, I felt like that was a series that was either going to keep the Jays' momentum going up the board or really set them back. Tampa always seems to have their number, and again, this week was no different. They go in, they're hosting Detroit this weekend, the top team in the American League. They go into today's rubber match and lose again by 1 run. All 3 games against Detroit were 1-run games, and they walked them off yesterday. So overall, 2-4 week for the Jays. I think they can build off this week. It wasn't like atrocious. They have the talent, I think, to build a team that is playoff contender worthy, but right now they just are not putting it together to my liking. Number 19, with the Cincinnati Reds. And for the Reds, they started the week losing to the White Sox, and I have had them falling down the board a little bit over the past few weeks, and I was like, okay, this kind of like cements that I am kind of accurate with them. For the most part, the pitching delivers, and they must have the most 1-0 games across the MLB in terms of losing them or winning them. They're right there, it seems like. But at the same time, they just pull out hats like this weekend where they sweep Cleveland, a team that has been pretty solid, at least for the past 2 years. Cincinnati, super inconsistent. I think that's the story with them right now, finding some inconsistency. I do believe they are much like the other teams we're going to talk about with the Twins and the Cardinals, how they are capable of putting together quite a run here, especially against lower talent on this board. They could put together a double-digit win streak. I think of all the teams we've talked about so far, they are the most capable of doing that, which in my books could move them from 19 into the top 2 rows pretty quickly. It's just right now the inconsistency really has me doubting it. Number 18, another team that has been kind of inconsistent so far this year. It's been on, I think, back-to-back pretty losing weeks. At least I know this week, 1-2 against Houston, 1-2 against St. Louis, 2-4 a week. Again, not the end of the world when you're having a 2-4 week, but when you're in that little battle with your local rivals, the Cardinals, like you want to kind of have something to build off there. And they really, defensively and pitching-wise, gave up a lot of offense to them, and then they lose a tight game yesterday, and then today they managed to squeak out and avoid getting swept. So on top of that, Kansas City needs to build some more. They need to be able to win some series, and just going 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 over and over again, you're going to start to dig yourself, especially in this American League Central. I would somewhat hold number 17. Didn't quite think I would have them here. 500 week for them, beating the Jays. We talked about that series already. They kind of probably should have lost that series. They did have a come from behind grand slam in the bottom of the, or top of the ninth in one of the games. But then they go and lose to Miami, which to me is just kind of what this team has been. They don't really have the pieces to put a lot of wins together. So for them to win a series like they did in the Jays and then to follow it up with a loss to Miami kind of makes sense to me. It's just the depth in that for Tampa Bay, especially when it comes to the pitching side, I can see being a struggle the rest of the way. This could be a peak side for Tampa Bay, and that part would not surprise me. Number 16, just snapped their 13-game winning streak. We do have the Minnesota Twins. When they started that streak, I believe they were in the bottom row. They might have been number 24, but they didn't move up like too much. We got to kind of take a look at who they were playing over this win streak. Sure, it's impressive no matter who you're playing in the MLB to put 13 wins together. But we got to keep in mind, they had 6 of those games against the Baltimore Orioles. We saw some other teams that were on the weaker side. And I think the highlight of that sweep, though, was the San Francisco Giants. So you do got to give a little bit of credit there. It's time. What are the Twins going to do when they start playing the Royals, they start playing the Guardians, and they start playing the Tigers? They got a lot of games to go. This division is wide open, especially for a second slot, which is probably going to be a wild card spot. Next up, number 15, I do have those Guardians. And the sweep against the Reds, getting swept by the Reds this weekend, kind of set them back a little bit here. They have been probably, and someone pointed this out pretty well last week, one of the most consistent teams across the MLB over the past few years. Going 2-1 against Milwaukee is just kind of that staple. They always seem to manage to win the series, especially against the teams in the bottom. We saw them beat the Jays a couple of weeks ago. And they've just managed to not really put together long losing streaks either. So for them to get swept by the Reds, it's going to be interesting how they rebound, because if you have been following this channel for at least the past 2 years, they are a team that I have been somewhat down on, thinking they've been overperforming their expectations. But again, someone pointed out they are the recipe of consistency. How they rebound from the sweep, I think this season is going to be very defining of what their season. Did not see who they're playing this week, so that part is a little bit interesting. Number 14. I dropped them a few spots. They lost one game to Colorado. I think they gave up 13 runs, but it just seems like the Arizona Diamondbacks are always in a game that both teams are scoring double digits. And when we're getting into that conversation, you got to be a little bit concerned that the pitching has what it takes to carry this team, especially in this National League West. Overall, though, you can't hate Arizona too much. They beat the Giants, and then they beat Colorado 4-2 in their own division. Pretty solid week, and funny enough, I do think I dropped them a couple of spots. Mainly because the pitching has got me super concerned after watching them closely this week and just the amount of runs. Can they compete scoring runs themselves? So far, it seems like it. Carroll having a hell of a season. So keep your eye on Arizona. That might be a little bit of an overreaction. We might see them bounce back up next week. Number 13, I do have the Atlanta Braves slowly but surely creeping back up the board. 3-1 against Washington, 2-1 against Boston, 5-2 week. It's a good solid week for the Braves. If they can just build off that, I think they're going to be very quickly back in the conversation. For a team that started April so badly, they're starting to kind of get their heat going, and they have the roster to really be a playoff team. And I think by when all is said and done, Acuna comes back in a month or so, they are going to be very much in that conversation in the top two rows. I don't doubt it whatsoever. They're just kind of have a couple of teams ahead of them that have been more consistent for the whole season so far. Maybe, arguably number 12, you could say maybe not. But the Rangers have DeGrom back, and have always been pitching very well. So they at least have two very solid guys here. And we saw them both going this weekend against the Houston Astros. Split that series, those guys 2-2. Those guys battle every single year. Those series are very fun to watch. I'd love to see those teams play in the playoffs. But Texas moving up a few spots. I got to be a little bit on them. I think they're overall playoff contending team, and it's hard for me to look at the teams below them and think that they don't match up well enough to beat them in like a 5-7 game series. So that's kind of why I have them there. Overall, the offense was very questionable to start the year. I think we're starting to see the signs of light of them coming around there, but that's one of those teams. Number 11. 2-2 series, so like really it's a pretty close battle between these two teams right now. Houston did start the week with a 2-1 series as well over Kansas City. So I like that. I like a team like Houston being able to pick up a win like that against a team that was in the playoffs last year, has had some consistency time, but lately Kansas City has not quite performed as well. And Houston seems to manage to squeeze out these series wins. And right now, it's hard to count Houston out. They've been one of the best dynasty-like teams over the past decade, so it's hard to count them out, especially at this point in the season. Number 10. Never thought I would see them this high this season coming into this year. Maybe this is a little bit of a push based on just their recent performance overall, but it seems like their offense has just been delivering as well. The pitching is really starting to shut things down. Mikolas, after a little bit of a struggle to start the season, he seems to be coming into form, and St. Louis is one of those guys. Last year, I moved them into this similar kind of position based on kind of some things I've seen, and immediately the wheels fell off. I don't know if that's going to be the case here. Right now, we're seeing a lot of National League teams seeming to be the more powerful teams in the American League, and this might be kind of what the fruition is of the Cardinals being able to find wins, especially when they're playing across against the American League. They go 2-1 against the Royals this weekend, almost got the sweep today, and 2-1 against the Philadelphia Phillies, which is a top row team on this board for weeks. So it's starting to show that they are a little bit for real. I want to see some consistency. I think even if they have a 4-2 week next week, they'll probably be in around the same area. It's more of just a solidifying of, okay, this is really where they are. Number 9. I have the Padres. The struggle is starting to be a little more apparent for the Padres here. 2-1 against the Angels, and then getting swept this weekend against the Mariners. So, like, Padres, they started off super hot. I was really getting behind them, especially because the offense seemed to be clicking, and the pitching was definitely tops in the league. But it seems like as of late, the offense has not been there that we saw, especially earlier on in the season. When they are starting to match up against some of these upper teams, especially when they're facing solid pitching, like of course you're going to face when you face the Seattle Mariners team, that's where the struggles are starting to be. I think these things need to be sorted out right now because a lot of the other topper teams have been able to be a little more consistent in that department and win in those areas. So to be swept, I think this is maybe the third sweep in the past month that the Padres have faced. When you're a top team, you're not getting swept that often, but it feels like that seems like a conversation that has happening to the Padres more often than not. Number 8, I do have the San Francisco Giants kind of floating in there. I was considering dropping them a little bit farther after a series loss to Arizona, but I really liked how they rebounded this weekend against the Athletics and finding a nice, solid sweep there. So overall, 4-2 week after starting the week against the division rival not doing so well. They've managed to put the wins together and stay in the conversation, in my opinion, and kind of just exact same spot as last week. I want to see these teams. So this row right here is a lot of let's see what happens next week, because you're flirting with the top row of this, the top few teams of this row are like trying to get in there, and these teams are trying to get into the top row, right? So it's like, oh, what's going to happen? Number 7. Just sticking in I think they're in the same spot as last week. I'm fairly certain. Started the week off 1-2 against the Yankees, hosting the Yankees. Would have liked to see them find the series win there. I'm not going to blame them. The Yankees, a top tier team on this board. But the Mariners bounced back big, and they really rebounded after what was really a suboptimal week last week. I like what we saw this week, especially after losing the first series. I think the Mariners are in that position where they're a little bit ahead of these other two teams. But as you can see, the American League West, very thick. We got 3 teams in the top 12. Number 6, and another team that I believe is in the same spot as last week. We got the Philadelphia Phillies. Took care of business massively this weekend after losing the first series of the week. So they beat Pirates 3-0. They lost to St. Louis, team that has surprised most teams. So really kind of in that same boat overall. I think at the end of the day, what I thought of this was, I think they would beat the St. Louis Cardinals most times, maybe. That's what, at least the way I look at it. And I still think they're ahead of the rest of these teams. Number 5, moving up a few spots back into the top 5. I do have the Detroit Tigers taking out a 2-game series, 2-1 against the Jays this weekend. 3-0 against Boston. So overall 5-1 against the American League East. So look back a couple of years ago, Detroit going 5-1 against the American League East would be in anyone's bingo card. But we're starting to see it come together here for Detroit. And I think at the end of the day, I have them as the second best team in the American League. They're on their way to win the Central, I think, with relative ease. But we're going to start to see some challengers come forth. I think possibly if we see an issue with the rotation, one guy goes down. Flaherty quite hasn't been himself that we saw last year, although he did look good this week. Detroit is young and hungry, and they're putting things together. It's a long season. We saw them do this at the end of last year. Let's see if they can pull it the rest of the year. Number 4, I have the Chicago Cubs 2-1 against the Marlins, 3-0 against the White Sox, 5-1 week. Someone pointed out last week, which is true, is Cubs have had one of the toughest schedules all season. We're starting to get some easy weeks ahead of them, a little easier, and we saw it this week, and they delivered. And arguably, some people are going to argue they probably could be higher on this board, honestly. They've just mashed runs-wise. We saw the offense really popping off. They're really going to miss Steele, I think, with this rotation. But so far, they have been delivering. Dropping a few spots to number 3. I do have the LA Dodgers, and losing the series to the Angels kind of starting to make me see the Dodgers have given up quite a lot of runs. Like if you look at some of their box scores, they are a team that does give up a lot of runs. The only difference from most teams that are in the bottom is that they also score a lot of runs. So overall, 500 a week, 2-1 against the Athletics, 1-2 against the Angels, a 500 week against two teams that are down here. Not exactly what we would like to see out of a Dodgers team that is looking to repeat. But right now, that's where I have them. I am concerned. I do think there are capabilities of them dropping. We saw them sweep Detroit earlier in the year. two different teams, obviously, at this point. And Cubs, they had their games all played against each other. I think overall they went 500, including the Tokyo series. But there you have it. Number 2. Funny enough, this is the Sunday nighter right now. These guys are split 1 game apiece, so I'm just going to put them both up right now. So the Yankees, I have them at number 2. They were the number 1 team in the AL last week. And I think the jump was more of the Dodgers kind of being iffy, and for the most part, the American League East kind of being bad. So the Yankees go up the board a bit here because, in my opinion, strong favorites to win the American League East. Overall, they beat Detroit a couple weeks ago, I believe, as well. I'm trying to remember now. I know that series went 2-1. I'm pretty sure it was the Yankees winning that one. But the Yankees offensively, we know what they're capable of. They also have Max Fried, who's playing the game of his life, playing tonight. He's in the rubber match against the Mets. That game's going to be tight. This is a little bit of my way of predicting who's going to win tonight, just for fun, right? So there's that. So the Yankees do win the series against the Mariners. I love to see that on the road when you do something like that. Going to Seattle, win that series. And now 1-1 against the Mets. They won Friday. They lost yesterday. We're seeing the rubber match probably already started literally right now. So it'd be interesting for that. I got the Mets up top, 2-1 against Pittsburgh this week. Overall, I think the Mets have just been one of the most consistent teams in the MLB. Record-wise, I think they're up there on the top of the spectrum. I might even be the top record overall. But definitely in the National League East, the Mets seem to have that little bit of advantage. The only downside with the Mets here, and maybe that's what's going to end up swapping them, especially if the Yankees win tonight, is that the Mets have the Phillies. They have the Braves, who are hungry and climbing. The Yankees don't seem to really have a challenger this year in the power rankings in the division, so that might end up playing a little bit of a role in the future. Let me know what you guys think. Where am I just completely out to lunch on this board? Otherwise, guys, we will see you out there for that next video.